Tonight, one of this century's most ambitious projects at the largest reservoir in the nation, which looked like this in 2000. Take a look at what it looks like now. It was so low it could become useless to communities that rely on it. Instead of looking to the sky, engineers are looking miles beneath the surface to get water by essentially pulling the plug of the nation's biggest bathtub.
Right below Nevada's largest reservoir, there is a $1.5 billion machine working day and night to pull water from the lake above. To build it, engineers had to bore through miles of solid rock. Its only purpose? To help one desert city survive a water level drop so severe that even the Hoover Dam stops operating completely. Las Vegas started work on this life-saving backup plan 2 decades ago, predicting that the water levels in the nation's largest reservoir would keep dropping, and they were right. It's a hedge against the reservoir reaching a threshold near the bottom of the lake that no one downstream wants to see touched. The pale border. Over the last few years, a giant pale ring has appeared surrounding the walls of Lake Mead. Resembling the marks in a bathtub that hasn't been cleaned in a long while, this ring measures over 150 feet in height, but it is not made by any human.
It's dropped something like 50 feet this year.
And it's still dropping.
Rather, these are mineral deposits from the lake water that have accumulated on the surrounding terrain over time. While that on its own is completely normal, what's concerning is what this signifies. The ring shows exactly how high the water line in Lake Mead used to be just a few decades ago, a scar highlighting how alarmingly low the lake sits today.
A critical water lifeline for millions of people across 7 states is hitting a dangerous new low.
It's nature's clear warning for anyone looking at it from the shore, since every inch of this scar signifies an inch of water that used to be there but isn't anymore. Lake Mead remains the largest water reservoir in the USA to date, but the last time it was full was back in 1983, at the time containing over 9 trillion gallons of water, an all-time high that it has never come close to reaching again since. The reason why is simple. The lake gives away more than it receives each year, like an overdrawn bank account that the entire Southwest relies on for its survival. But the debt is mounting up, and things are already reaching the point of unsustainability. Since the year 2000, the waterline has declined by over 150 feet. To put that into perspective, Lake Mead has a total depth of just 532 feet at maximum capacity, containing 26 million acre-feet of water. Today, its water level sits below 35% of that at only 8 million acre-feet. And the reason why that matters so much is because of this reservoir's significance. Since its creation, Lake Mead has become an essential component of the American Southwest and Mexico's infrastructure. Millions of acres of farmland in Arizona and California depend on it for irrigation. 25 million people in California, Arizona, and Nevada rely on it for drinking water. Las Vegas gets 90% of its water from this one source alone. Most important of all, Hoover Dam uses Lake Mead to generate 4 billion kilowatt hours of energy a year on average. With the drop in water levels, it now produces 25 to 30% less. But the worst is yet to come, because as the water level keeps dropping further, it gets ever closer to a threshold experts have named the dead pool. Located 895 feet above sea level, when the water level drops to this specific point, everything comes to a standstill. At this level, the surface of the lake will be too low for any of the water to pass through Hoover Dam at all. That means no electricity generation, and no flow downstream for water deliveries to farms and cities. The lake just stagnates. Every inch that the pale ring around Lake Mead increases is a step towards such a catastrophe becoming a reality. But there is one city that foresaw this very problem, and instead of waiting, it planned for it. 20 years ago, Las Vegas poured $1.5 billion into creating a machine that could reach below the dead pool, extracting water even when taps run dry in other cities. This machine is operating day and night at this very moment, providing water to the desert city, even as Lake Mead sits far lower than it has ever been since its creation. But before we discuss the engineering genius behind this mega project, we need to first understand how Lake Mead got to the point it is today in the first place. The dam that changed everything. During the Great Depression, the economy of the United States went into complete shambles. The biggest problem on the table was unemployment. To solve it, the government decided to undertake massive-scale projects that would create a lot of jobs. Among them was the Hoover Dam, a project so daring and ambitious, many experts thought it impossible to build. Its main purpose was to fix one big problem: the Colorado River. the Colorado River was prone to flooding, causing serious loss of life and property as entire communities were overrun during high rainfall seasons. A dam would help stabilize the river's flow enough that flooding would stop being an ever-looming threat for the locals. But there were also other considerations. A dam on the Colorado River would be vital in ensuring the region's development, as it would provide an important water source to promote industry and new cities. On top of that, it would help generate electricity. On all accounts, it was the perfect solution to the myriad of problems plaguing the nation and hindering its development. The project was quickly approved, and engineers decided that Black Canyon, on the border of Nevada and Arizona, was the ideal location for it, as it provided ample space downstream for the spillway. And so, construction work began in 1931. The Hoover Dam was designed to be a massive arch gravity dam, standing 726 feet tall. At its bottom, it would have a thickness of 660 feet, with the top being thinner at just 45 feet. Once finished, it would be the largest concrete structure in the world at the time. Constructing this behemoth was an undertaking unlike anything done before in the nation's history. Over 5,000 men were employed at the peak of the project in 1934. The working conditions were brutal. The scorching sun beat down on the workers, raising temperatures to over 120 degrees. 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete was poured, building up the structure layer by layer. In 1936, the dam was completed, proving every critic wrong. And then, the valley behind it was flooded by the Colorado River, creating a reservoir that spanned 112 miles. This reservoir was given the name Lake Mead. Once fully filled for the first time, it contained a staggering 9 trillion gallons of water. To put that in perspective, it's enough water to meet the household needs of every home in the United States for 10 years. Hoover Dam was a success story in every way. It tamed the Colorado River, eliminating the threat of flooding. The reservoir provided water to emerging urban behemoths such as Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and San Diego. Lake Mead is the reason why these cities have been able to become the economic and agricultural powerhouses they are today. The electricity produced by the dam has also been a game changer, as the Hoover Dam generates an average of 4 billion kilowatt hours in a year. That electricity goes to California, Nevada, and Arizona, of which California gets the lion's share at 58%, with Nevada getting 23% and Arizona 19%. But all this did not come for free. It costed $49 million to build Hoover Dam, equal to roughly $1 billion in today's money. A much steeper price was paid by the workers, 96 of whom died. But in the end, the project achieved what it set out to do. It created jobs at a time when the nation was at its lowest. It fostered the growth of cities like Las Vegas, which grew from a population of 8,000 to 2.2 million, relying on Lake Mead for 90% of its water needs. And this is just one of the many cities in the 7 states that depend on Hoover Dam to survive. Today, the Colorado River provides for 40 million people in the USA and parts of Mexico. Anything that goes wrong with it has the potential to destroy communities. And for years, everything seemed fine. The Hoover Dam and Lake Mead provided water and electricity within the expected parameters, often even exceeding the expected outputs. Everything was just according to plan. But what if the plan itself has a major flaw that places an expiration date on Lake Mead? The fatal flaw. On November 24, 1922, long before the Hoover Dam entered its construction phase, the Colorado River Compact was signed. Under this deal, the representatives of 7 states that fell within the Colorado River Basin, California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, decided on how the water from the river would be split between the states once the dam finished construction and Lake Mead was formed. The contract split the 7 states into 2 groups. The upper basin states included Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, and the lower basin states included California, Arizona, and Nevada. The upper basin states got an allocation of 7.5 million acre-feet of water from the river, and the lower basin states also got an equal allocation of 7.5 million acre-feet of water from the river, bringing the total draw to 15 million acre-feet from the river. At a later date, Mexico got its share as well, being allowed to draw 1.5 million acre-feet a year. This brought the total water draw from the Colorado River to a staggering 16.5 million acre-feet every single year in the future. But why this number specifically? Well, this figure came from the measurements of Colorado River's total water flow, conducted between 1899 and 1920. Based on these calculations, it was concluded that the Colorado River had an average water flow rate of 16.5 to 18 million acre-feet of water a year. And this agreement was written into law, essentially setting it in stone. But this measurement proved to be completely wrong. Turns out the measurements taken at the time had been heavily inflated because the Colorado River was undergoing one of the wettest stretches in the last 500 years. This gave the negotiators the inflated numbers, when in reality, the actual average flow of the Colorado River is a bit over 14 million acre-feet a year, based on studies conducted later by studying tree stump layers and climate data. To make things worse, ever since the year 2000, the river has been in a multi-decade drought phase, which means the overall water flow has plummeted to just 12.5 million acre-feet a year. Now, compare that to the 16.5 million acre-feet total water drawn by the upper basin states, lower basin states, and Mexico combined, and you get a 4 million acre-feet deficit. A deficit that must come out of somewhere to meet the demand. That somewhere is Lake Mead, which has been acting as the cushion. Every year for the last 2 decades, 4 million acre-feet of water flows out of Lake Mead and is never replenished. Now, even that cushion is running out, as Lake Mead sits over 150 feet below where it used to be, conveniently marked by the pale ring. The results of this have been severe. The bleak effects. The destructive combination of megadroughts and overallocation has created a bunch of serious problems already. The most obvious effect has been the water level dropping, but that has created its own set of issues with far-reaching consequences. Water allocations have been forcefully reduced by the authorities in some of the states, including Arizona and Nevada. Mexico also has had its quota cut significantly. Agriculture is affected the most by these cuts. Farmers who have used the water from the Colorado River for generations were told they wouldn't be getting enough water for the next crop cycle, causing the agricultural capacity in several regions to be reduced. But this is just the beginning. As the water levels go down even further, more and more such cuts are to be expected in other states as well. Agriculture, industries, and households that rely on Lake Mead to survive and flourish will either have to cut back on their consumption drastically or risk running out of water in the near future. Neither option sounds appealing. But before that happens, there is an even bigger threat looming on the horizon. While designing Hoover Dam, no one really thought that the water levels could ever get as low as they are currently. So, the dam's design was never built to deal with such shortages over the long term. As the water levels keep on dropping, experts predict that Hoover Dam will see a sharp drop in electricity production capacity. And if the water levels drop below 950 feet, it would be sitting below the dam's water intakes. This means that energy production will cease completely, since water cannot even enter the turbines to spin them. This is a hard physical and design limit for the dam that cannot be fixed. The entire structure would essentially become useless for electricity generation. And finally, there is the dead pool point at 895 feet above sea level. Once the water level drops to this point, it cannot be pushed through the dam at all, cutting off the downflow. This is the point of no return that all states that rely on Lake Mead fear the most. Arizona, California, and Mexico are the ones that will be affected the most since they're downstream. They will stop getting any water at all. Meanwhile, the states located upstream would be drawn into a lengthy legal battle for water rights once Lake Mead hits the dead pool. For one city, however, the risk is especially extreme. Las Vegas built its own water intakes into Lake Mead long before the water levels began dropping so significantly. Engineers unaware of the problem built the 2 intakes 1,050 feet above sea level and 1,000 feet above sea level, respectively. That's above the dead pool point by more than 100 feet. This puts Las Vegas in the worst position, since long before Lake Mead hits dead pool, Las Vegas would have already been rendered incapable of drawing water from the reservoir, since its water intakes would be above the waterline. For the desert city, this would be a death sentence, as it gets 90% of its total water supply directly from Lake Mead. Once the intakes stop working, taps in the entire city will give nothing but air. This is the bleak future that Las Vegas authorities saw in 2008 when the pale ring was just beginning to emerge on the banks of Lake Mead. But instead of sitting around waiting for the situation to get worse, Las Vegas decided to build its way out of trouble. the tunnel under the lake. The plan that Las Vegas had come up with was quite simple: build a new water intake into the lake. However, designing and building such a project was far from easy. This new intake would have to be located much deeper into the lake to ensure it would always have access to water. The engineers decided to construct it at 860 feet above sea level, putting it about 35 feet below the dreaded dead pool point. This would ensure that even in the worst-case scenario, Las Vegas would still have access to water. But building so far down had its own challenges. Due to the increased depth, the intake couldn't be built just anywhere. It had to be built in the middle of the lake, where the lake itself was deep enough to accommodate the intake. Once a spot was picked, the construction finally began in 2008. The crew began by creating a vertical access shaft on the bank of the river, extended about 600 feet below the surface. With the shaft dug out and properly stabilized, the big guns were brought in. A German-made tunnel boring machine called the S502. Designed specifically to construct under Lake Mead, this TBM model was one of the few capable of handling the rough terrain. The entire thing was hauled down the vertical shaft in pieces, where it was assembled and put to work. Inch by inch, the TBM chewed through the rocks, cutting out a tunnel right underneath Lake Mead. The conditions the crew was dealing with were extremely risky. The terrain being dug through was very unpredictable. It constantly switched between hard rock and softer material, which would have been risky to dig through. The workers had to rely on a technique called pre-excavation grouting, where they injected cement into the rocks ahead to stabilize them before digging through. The water above was an ever-looming threat. At any moment, an unexpected leak or crack could let in tons of water, completely flooding the excavated tunnel. With trillions of gallons of water right above, this was more like digging below the ocean floor than working in a desert. While the TBM was busy digging the tunnel, an intake structure was being lowered in the middle of the lake. The crew secured it to the lakebed using thousands of truckloads of concrete. Precision was key. The intake couldn't be off the mark, since that was the spot where the TBM would burst out once the tunneling was completed. One mistake, and the results could have been catastrophic. The TBM could have caused a break or gone off route, causing the entire structure to not work at all. Thankfully, none of that happened. Engineers were able to ensure the TBM broke through, being only a few millimeters off its target, which was well within the acceptable error range. The tunneling concluded in 2014, but the work was not done just yet. The tunnel was only the pipe through which Las Vegas would extract the water from Lake Mead. But to actually move that water, gravity was not enough. A pumping station had to be built separately. Built on Saddle Island, this pumping station was built by digging a massive underground cavern. Within this cavern, engineers fitted 34 vertical shafts that could pump out water from the intake, even when the lake above dropped to very low water levels. The pumping station then moves the water uphill toward treatment plants feeding Las Vegas. With the intake shaft and the pumping station finishing construction in 2020, water was poured into the cavern for the first time. With this one mega project costing nearly $1.5 billion, Las Vegas ensured that it will have a constant water supply for the coming decades, even when the water stops flowing from the lower basin states entirely. But it's not like this is the only step the city has taken to ensure it never runs out of water. Las Vegas has been fighting for its survival long before the new intake tunnel was dug, and it is still doing so today. Survival through action. While the new intake project is the magnum opus that Las Vegas has conducted, receiving engineering awards from Britain and Switzerland, there are 3 other, more silent projects Las Vegas has undertaken to ensure water security for its inhabitants that don't make the headlines as often. Let's talk about those one by one. The first method Las Vegas has deployed is conservation. Seeing the looming danger, the Las Vegas authorities were quick to move towards a more efficient water infrastructure than can be found in most other cities in the world. And the main way it has done so is by fighting against unnecessary use of water, specifically ornamental grass. Las Vegas is in the middle of a desert-like region, so growing grass here requires lots and lots of water. Despite that, however, nearly every property in the city has ornamental lawns. In 2002, the city authorities launched the Water Smart Landscapes program, which was essentially a cash for grass scheme. Under this program, the city paid the residents and businesses as much as $3 for every square foot of ornamental grass and unnecessary plants they removed from their properties. Since that program launched, ornamental turf has virtually disappeared from the city, being instead replaced with desert landscaping. Surely such a small change wouldn't save too much water. The numbers say otherwise. According to studies, the city is saving a total of 560,000 acre-feet of water from being wasted away. Since 2021, the authorities are now moving towards completely banning ornamental lawns in Las Vegas entirely. What that does is minimize the outdoor water usage around the city down to a negligible amount. And the reason why that is such an important step towards water security is because of Nevada's next step in its water conservation plan: recycling. Water used outdoors, such as ornamental lawns, is impossible to recycle. With ornamental lawns being outlawed, the city only has to deal with indoor usage. Think showers, toilet water, laundry runoff. This kind of water usage can be recycled, and Las Vegas does just that. It treats the water and sends it back to Lake Mead. In return, it gets return flow credit for its water usage. Lastly, Las Vegas has ensured its survival through another hidden construction project. Over the last decade or so, Southern Nevada has been storing treated water in underground storage systems, creating its own massive reserve it can rely on in case of a water shortage. An extra safety measure to ensure survival, even in the worst-case scenario. That does it for this video. If you enjoyed watching, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.